As somebody who considers himself to be at least reasonably squeamish, I'm left a little puzzled about what exactly in the substance prompted the alleged walkouts. I mean, that could be all they are, alleged, or overblown accounts of a handful of extremely squeamish people dragged to see this with someone else. It's always worth remembering that accounts of fainting and walkouts are good for drumming up both hype and negative press, after all, so it's always worth taking with a grain of salt. This isn't to say that the substance's body horror scenes are ineffective when they finally get to them, but I'm also somewhat curious that maybe what caused however many people to leave the film early had more to do with the sexual content than the grotesque. Admittedly, all promotion for the film pushed this part of it way more than anything that would prepare audiences for what is, if I'm being needlessly reductive, the Nutty Professor meets the Fly. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that some people saw a female-led, female-directed film promoted as a critique of harmful and shallow standards of beauty, and were therefore a little taken aback by how significantly more male than female the film's gaze appears to be. Sure, the reason for the camera being that fixated on Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley's bodies serves a purpose. The fact that the whole film is shown from Elizabeth and Sue's perspective points to how consumed they are by the standards foisted upon them. Similar, I think, to why aerobics seems to be the very centre of show business in this world, because it has become the centre of their whole lives. The sickening, space-invading depiction of Dennis Quaid's Harvey is enough to communicate that Elizabeth in particular still recognises and despises the lecherousness and cruelty of it all. But after working so hard for so long, she also can't help but place extraordinary value on youth, fitness, and the eternally vague X factor that others like Harvey dictate. Still, all the leering shots are presented pretty straightforwardly for most of the film, as Sue mostly just relishes her fresh start. So I can see how being this egregious might come across as a double standard to some people. Coralie Fargeat's previous film Revenge also didn't shy away from showing off Matilda Lutz's beauty, but spending the majority of the film also covered in cuts, bruises, dirt, and the blood of her enemies, as well as being armed to the teeth, the idea that our exploitative gaze has turned against us is pretty clear early on. The other detail that separates the substance from Revenge is simply that this isn't a revenge film. Elizabeth experiences great punishment for committing no crime, as far as we know anyway. In regards to everything we've been presented with, she chased a dream, acquiesced to every demand put on her by those with power to make her dream come true, abided all the luridness that she had no power to control, the dream became her life, and because when she's abruptly told that it's come to an end, despite previous assurances that men like Harvey went back on, and she resorts to a desperate last-ditch effort to get back what has become her whole life, she's punished because in the end, doing it proved that she doesn't love herself enough. Nothing cathartic in that, that is just blatantly unfair, and a sad reminder that if there is a God, then it does not give a flying fuck about how good you've been all your life. The most direct revenge the substance can really muster is to finally stain the perfect body image in all those who push it, with a shining elevator's worth of blood, sweat, and tears, forcing them momentarily to reckon with what they've wrought, although almost certainly missing the point. So, patriarchal, late capitalist industries forcing unrealistic standards upon people with no care for how it risks robbing them of all sense of self-worth, or prospects for a healthy and happy life, is well-trodden ground at this point. Not that that really matters, given how little the most regularly and fairly critiqued institutions have changed over the years. The least they can do is put up with being preached at on the regular, but Fargeat is also more interested in digging deep into the norm rather than subverting it. This is the way that the substance most resembles Revenge. Yes, that film delivers more explicit catharsis, what with the literal murder of her attackers, but it never lets the aspect of violent vengeance that so often provides a gut-level instinctive feeling of relief override the aftershock of surviving violation or the terror and urgency of needing to get away from the threat of greater harm. She achieves revenge, the priority is survival. Rather than being a story that blames personal vanity for everything wrong that happens to her, the substance piles so-called self-inflicted torture onto Elizabeth and, eventually, Sue, but it never overrides the tragedy that this suffering is undeserved, and the latest cruelty inflicted upon her by a world that she has no control over. Mostly. I said this for Blink twice and I'll say it for the substance, a final shot is very important.